Hello everybody, Father Scott Vanderveer here with another installment in our series on the season of creation. Today, I'm looking at ways that we can make a difference in reducing the pressure the planet feels with all of the stresses that so much industry and consumption is causing. So here's what I think is very interesting for all of us to consider. There are ways that our ancestors used to live more lightly on the earth that we can retrieve. One of the ones I read about recently that I thought was so interesting is that those large ships in the shipping industry, picture those container ships that go across the ocean, tractor trailer loads piled one on top of the other. I recently learned that the shipping industry is returning to the use of sails. Of course, we know that all ships used to depend on wind power to move. There was no other option. But we've gotten away from that because now we think of the kind of shipping that involves sails as only being recreational, boating and using skills to guide a sailboat, things like that. But no, it turns out that the wind is a tremendous source of power. And you maybe, like I, have had the experience of seeing tall ships come into a harbor of a city. A lot of us experienced that on certain times of commemoration. I think of the pictures of the tall ships in New York Harbor in 1976 commemorating the 200th birthday of our country. And I'm just aware that sometimes the thing that is the most practical and frugal is also the most beautiful. I think about grandparents who didn't have money to buy fancy home goods. And so they would use scraps of fabric that were lying around. They would use little pieces of things that weren't useful in any other way because they weren't big enough to make a piece of clothing or be turned into anything useful. So what they did was use these scraps to make quilts. And these quilts are gorgeous, made of scraps. They didn't need to be so beautiful, but the frugality of using scraps forced the maker to make them a design, not to be a solid color or a blend of colors, stripes or something like that, but instead to be an amazing pattern, a prism, an amalgamation of color and beauty that dazzles us to this day. So many people whose grandparents made quilts because of their poverty now display them on the wall because of their beauty. It turns out that a sailing ship with long and tall sails that can catch the wind and harness that power are more beautiful than ships that run on diesel. And quilts are more beautiful than fancy purchased linens. I was recently at a lecture by a Jewish rabbi who was talking about the responsibility for what the Jewish people call tikkun olam, the repair of the earth that is a requirement of all people of goodwill. And part of this is taking care of the planet itself, not just renewing society with virtue, but renewing the actual land on which we live. And he was saying this. Sometimes, you know how your phone gets filled with stuff that's jamming up the storage and then you can't add another picture or you can't send a video. It'll say first you have to delete files to free up storage. That's a pretty typical experience for a lot of us to have. I know that I've had to buy more storage in the cloud each month because there's just not enough room for the pictures and videos and files that I want to keep. Well, what he said is, you know that when you're trying to get your phone available for new content in a hurry, if you're trying to make a lot of room, you delete the biggest things first, the things that take up the most storage, the things that require the most energy. You start there. And in a lot of cases, for me, it's podcasts. I used to think videos take up the most space, but it turns out that these hour-long podcasts that we listen to and then keep in our phone as a downloaded file we don't even remember is there, they take up the most room. But obviously, if you want to make room in your phone, you don't start by deleting emails. That would take forever because each of them are so small. You start with deleting pictures and videos and podcasts, things that take up a lot of room. And so what this rabbi said is, studies have shown that if we want to delete the part of our consumption that is taking up the most space in the Earth's strain, if you will, if we want to make the biggest impact with the least amount of effort, the biggest kind of deletion to free up storage space that also could be used in this case to free up space on our Earth for clean air and renewable resources. He said the answer is in reducing food waste. I was surprised by that. I would have thought it was an issue of plastic. We know that plastic is a big problem, but no, it's food waste. Plastic is a huge problem, but food waste creates the most methane gas in its decomposition in landfills. And that is what is causing the biggest deleterious effect in the changing climate. I did not know that, but I find it fascinating. It means that we should buy less food and eat more of what we buy. We should not throw things out too quickly. We should make sure that if the vegetables are starting to get a little soft or spotted, we turn them into a stew or a soup. We don't throw them in the garbage. We don't let them go so far that they can't be consumed. Because not only does that waste food, which doesn't feel good, but it also contributes to the methane production that is changing the climate faster than anything else. So if we want to make one change that could make the world better, we could start using the food in our fridge more efficiently. We could, and this is a big one, could we start composting? Could we use our garbage disposals more efficiently so that we're not putting so much stuff in the garbage, but grinding up the scraps so that they can be filtered out in our water system? And can we, if it's possible for us in our context, compost the scraps that could be turned into soil instead of making it something that is going to make the world less fertile? Could we use it to make the world more fertile in the form of compost and fresh, rich soil? Maybe we don't have a compost possibility, but our neighbors do, and so we could put our scraps in a compost bin and deliver them to their larger compost heap on a regular basis. I think all of us are hearing that there are things we can do. Our grandparents used the scraps of fabric that might have turned to rags or to trash, and they made quilts that not only kept us warm, but now are heirlooms that fill us with pride. We all can consider what we want to retrieve from those frugal actions of our ancestors. Things like tall sails on ships, like quilts on our beds, and like more food in the stew and less in the garbage. Thank you for being on this journey with me. May God renew our earth, and may God bless you all.